The moment this recording surfaced, the world shifted. It wasn't just another whisper behind the palace walls, another rumor floating around tabloids. No, this was different. This was raw, unfiltered, a glimpse into a private world that household staff had long feared to describe. And yet, here it was, echoing in crystal-clear audio. You might think you know Meghan Markle, the poised Duchess of Sussex, smiling at gala events, effortlessly charming the cameras. But what you're about to hear shatters that public image. This is the side of Meghan that the cameras never catch, the side that only those living in her immediate orbit have witnessed, and the story isn't pretty. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Imagine walking into a household where every glance, every word, every step feels like stepping on a minefield. The tension isn't subtle, it's palpable. Staff have spoken in whispers, afraid that even recounting what they saw might have repercussions. And yet, in that fear, the truth has emerged. The recording paints a picture of a marriage consumed by ego, obsession, and an insatiable hunger for public attention. A marriage that, according to those who live within its walls, is as toxic as any reality show scandal you've ever witnessed, but with stakes far higher. Did Meghan really go crazy behind closed doors? Did arguments spiral into full-blown household meltdowns? Staff describe scenes that sound almost cinematic, doors slammed with bone-jarring force, voices raised to frightening decibels, and gestures that left even the most seasoned employees shocked. And then there's Harry, often portrayed as the level-headed, empathetic prince. He's cast in a role that's far more complicated in these recordings. Was he a pacifier trying to calm the storm, or was he complicit in fueling it? Every narrative you've been fed has a twist here, and the twist is darker than you could imagine. We'll get into the details of that recording in a moment. But first, why does this matter now? Why should you care about whispers from palace corridors, so far removed from the lives of most of us? Because this isn't just gossip. This is about power, control, and the consequences of fame when it overtakes humanity. This story impacts more than just Meghan and Harry. It influences public perception, media narratives, and the very fabric of the royal family's public image. And right now, the world is watching, waiting for the next revelation, the next scandal, the next headline that confirms what everyone secretly suspects, that the fairy tale has cracks, and they're widening fast. Curiosity gaps are the fuel for obsession, and here's one that will grip you. Staff have reported arguments that weren't just about trivialities. They were about the control of narrative, about image management, about who gets to decide what the public sees. Every staff member, from housekeepers to personal assistants, has a story, and their stories align in disturbing ways. Meghan's focus on public perception, her alleged outbursts over minor slights, and her insistence on perfection created a household environment that many described as unlivable. And Harry? His attempts to mediate, defend, or perhaps simply survive within this ecosystem add layers of complexity that nobody could have anticipated. One employee recounted an evening that would haunt them forever. A minor mistake, a missing item, a misunderstood instruction, triggered a reaction that shook the entire staff. Meghan's voice, raised and sharp, cut through the halls like a warning siren. Her frustration wasn't hidden. It was broadcast in real time, leaving staff scrambling to contain the fallout. Harry's response, measured on the surface, was undercut by subtle gestures, words that seemed conciliatory yet carried weight. The recording captures these moments in a way that text cannot, allowing us to hear the emotional tension crackle like static electricity. It's intimate, uncomfortable, and impossible to ignore. And yet, even within this chaos, there are contradictions. Meghan, often seen as charitable and poised, is described in the recording as manipulative, exacting, and sometimes terrifying. Harry, the golden prince who left royal duties behind to support his wife, is sometimes portrayed as passive, sometimes as enabling, sometimes as a mediator caught in a no-win situation. Each layer adds complexity, and each story from staff exposes a truth that the public rarely sees. That fame, money, and the glare of constant media attention can twist even the closest relationships into battlegrounds. But here's the kicker. This isn't just about private spats. This recording allegedly reveals that the very foundation of their marriage is questioned by those who live in the house every day. Staff have described arguments over money, arguments over image, arguments over influence, and arguments over control. Some said that love seems absent, replaced by performance. Others admitted that the couple appears trapped in cycles of resentment, unable or unwilling to break free from the demands they place on each other. And as we unpack these stories, you'll start to wonder, is this about Meghan and Harry as people, or is it about the empire they've built around themselves? Emotional beats are unavoidable when you hear this recording. Staff describe moments of fear, tension, and bewilderment. "I never knew if I would make it through the day without witnessing an explosion," one recalled. Another said, "Every small action felt like walking on eggshells in a hurricane." Imagine being in that environment, knowing that your job and your safety depends on navigating the unpredictable moods of two people who are constantly performing for an audience while simultaneously waging war behind closed doors. The stakes are high, the atmosphere toxic, and the consequences, both emotional and professional, immense. You might be asking yourself, how did this get recorded? Who had access? And most importantly, why is it surfacing now? These are the questions that will guide our journey through this story. The answers, revealed gradually, are as shocking as the recordings themselves. Leaks like these don't happen in isolation. They are the product of fear, desperation, and the desire to tell the truth when silence is no longer an option. Each piece of audio, each staff account, adds another dimension to a narrative that has remained hidden from public view until now. By the end of this video, you'll have a panoramic view of what it's like to live inside the Sussex household during these turbulent years. You'll hear about outbursts that would make even the most dramatic reality TV seem tame. You'll understand how fame and fortune, something many would kill for, can corrode intimacy, trust, and loyalty. And perhaps most importantly, you'll confront the contradictions that make this story irresistible. The charming public figures who, behind closed doors, reveal a side of themselves that no camera could ever capture. But before we dive into the recordings, before we unpack every argument, every moment of tension, every clash of ego, consider this. What you're about to hear isn't hypothetical. It's real. It's been witnessed, experienced, and in some cases, survived. And while the public may debate the morality, the motivations, and the consequences, one truth remains undeniable. This household, like few others in the world, is a stage for a drama of epic proportions, and we have front row seats. So buckle up. This isn't a story of fairy tale endings. This isn't a story of perfect marriages, polished appearances, or Instagram smiles. This is a story of obsession, of ego, of fame run amok, and the human cost of living under constant scrutiny. And as you listen, as you follow the revelations, you'll start to ask yourself uncomfortable questions. How far would you go to protect your image? How far would you go to control your partner? And how far is too far when the world is watching every move? And then there's the staff, the silent witnesses whose voices are finally being heard. Their courage, their fear, and their honesty form the backbone of this story. They describe not only what they saw, but how it felt to be trapped in a house where every day was a performance, every word was scrutinized, and every misstep could trigger a storm. Their accounts reveal not just a marriage in turmoil, but a microcosm of fame's power to distort relationships, to heighten insecurities, and to create an environment where no one truly feels safe. By now, you might be wondering, what is the most shocking revelation in all of this? What is the moment that will make you pause, replay, and question everything you thought you knew? That moment is coming. It's teased throughout these accounts. It's hidden in the recordings. And when we reach it, the impact will be undeniable. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What if I told you that a single audio recording could rewrite everything we thought we knew about Meghan Markle and Prince Harry? That one snippet of conversation, captured in the privacy of their own home, could expose the cracks in their marriage that tabloids have only hinted at for years. The moment this recording surfaced, it set off shockwaves that no one saw coming. And today, for the first time, you'll hear the story behind it, the people who heard it, how it spread, and why it matters more than ever. The recording didn't appear in some shady corner of the internet. It came from the very people who lived inside the Sussex household, staff members who had seen firsthand the tension, the arguments, and the hidden dramas that played out behind closed doors. These are not hearsay stories. They are eyewitness accounts. And the audio, though heavily scrutinized for authenticity, matches what multiple staff members have independently described. The voices captured on that recording, the rising frustration, the sharpness in tone, the subtle jabs at one another. They're almost cinematic. But unlike a movie, there are real people living through this, feeling every sting, every blow, every verbal punch. So how did this recording come to light? One of the housekeepers, after years of witnessing what they described as a toxic storm behind the polished walls, decided enough was enough. They reached out anonymously to a media source, explaining that what people saw publicly was only a fraction of the story. The recording was provided as evidence. Not for fame, not for money, but to show the world that even those who seem to live in perfection may be hiding chaos. And when it leaked, the reactions were instantaneous. Shock, denial, outrage. But beneath it all, curiosity. Everyone wanted to know, what exactly happens when the doors close and cameras aren't watching? The audio begins innocuously enough, voices in mid-conversation, but it quickly escalates. There's tension in the pauses, a subtle but unmistakable bite in Meghan's tone, and the sense that something has been simmering for hours, maybe days. Staff who listened said it felt like standing too close to a fire that could ignite at any moment. You can hear frustration, irritation, and anger threading through the dialogue. But you can also hear something else, calculation. Every word seems carefully measured, but emotion leaks through, raw and unrestrained. Harry's voice, often described as calm and soothing in public appearances, is present but different here. Some staff describe it as defensive, others as distant, and a few as enabling. The contradiction is striking. On one hand, you hear him attempting to pacify, to mediate, to smooth over the tension. On the other hand, there's an undercurrent of resignation, a sense that he's trapped in a situation that even he cannot fully control. Staff have said they weren't sure if he was trying to help, or simply trying to survive the storm without getting burned. The first few seconds of the recording set the tone, but what follows is far more revealing. Meghan reportedly reacts explosively to a minor domestic issue, a misplaced item, a slight error in timing, something the average person might shrug off. Her voice rises, doors slam, footsteps echo across the room, and staff scramble. One assistant described it as the sound of tension manifesting physically. Imagine working in a house where the smallest misstep can trigger a public, or in this case, private, meltdown. Staff admit it was terrifying, but they also admit it was mesmerizing in a way they couldn't look away from. There's a magnetism to chaos, especially when it's wrapped in glamour and fame. Yet, what's most remarkable about this recording is the contradiction between public and private personas. Meghan, the poised, polished duchess, is unrecognizable. She is forceful, commanding, and sometimes bordering on merciless. She argues not just to win, but to assert control over every aspect of the household. Staff described feeling like pawns in a chess game where the stakes were always higher than they understood. And Harry, despite his royal upbringing and diplomatic training, appears caught in the crossfire. His attempts at mediation are genuine, staff say, but they're also inconsistent. Sometimes he softens the tension, sometimes he fuels it, consciously or unconsciously. You might be asking yourself, why would this recording come to light now? Why would staff risk exposure by providing evidence that could, in theory, jeopardize their own careers? The answer lies in human endurance. Staff explained that living in a constant cycle of tension, fear, and unpredictability takes a psychological toll. When the recording surfaced, it wasn't because someone wanted to expose Meghan or Harry for entertainment. It was because the accumulation of daily stresses, contradictions, and manipulations became unbearable. The recording is a cry for understanding from people who felt voiceless for too long. And the content itself? Beyond the volume of the arguments, it's the nuance that makes it compelling. There are moments of vulnerability, frustration, resentment, and fleeting attempts at reconciliation. You hear Meghan expressing irritation over public perception, Harry defending his wife's intentions, and both grappling with the pressures of fame and expectations. Staff say it is impossible to separate their personal grievances from the overwhelming presence of public scrutiny, wealth, and social expectations. Every word, every inflection is a testament to the complex interplay of power, ego, and love, messy, flawed, and deeply human. But the story doesn't stop there. Following the leak, media outlets, social platforms, and royal commentators erupted. Headlines ranged from meltdown at the manor to household chaos exposed. And yet, amidst the sensationalism, one critical question remained largely unasked. What is the truth behind the audio? Staff accounts, corroborated by multiple insiders, provide context. Without them, the public sees only fragments, snippets stripped of emotion, nuance, and consequences. These stories are necessary to understand the full picture. A household on edge, a couple under pressure, and employees navigating a world they never asked to enter but cannot leave. Some staff have admitted feeling conflicted. On one hand, loyalty to the family kept them silent for years. On the other hand, witnessing repeated chaos, emotional manipulation, and public image obsession compelled them to speak out. The tension between discretion and honesty is palpable, and it raises another question for you, the audience. What would you do if you were in their position? Would you stay silent to preserve your job and protect public image, or would you step forward to reveal the truth, no matter the risk? The leaked recording also challenges public perception of the couple's relationship. Media portrayals often show Meghan and Harry as united, supportive, and charming. But the audio and staff accounts suggest a far more complicated dynamic. Arguments frequently revolved not only around daily household issues, but also around money, public appearances, and personal control. Some staff described moments where the line between conflict and obsession blurred, where discussions about trivial matters escalated into full-blown confrontations that left everyone on edge. And here's a revelation that few have considered. This recording doesn't just document a couple's argument. It documents a microcosm of fame itself, the pressures, the expectations, the psychological toll. The household, gilded and prestigious, functions like a pressure cooker. Every action is scrutinized, every word analyzed, and every emotion amplified. Staff described the atmosphere as one of constant alertness, a perpetual balancing act between serving the family and surviving their unpredictable moods. But perhaps the most shocking aspect of the recording is how it portrays control and influence. Meghan, staff say, exerts immense power over household operations, delegating authority selectively, rewarding loyalty, and punishing perceived disloyalty. Harry, while often attempting to mediate, is not immune to the pull of these dynamics. The combination creates an environment in which staff must constantly read between the lines, anticipate reactions, and navigate an ever-changing web of tension and expectation. And while we've only just scratched the surface, the implications are staggering. This isn't a story about a single argument or a passing disagreement. This is a story about a household, a marriage, and a team of employees caught in a maelstrom of fame, expectation, and private conflict. The recording, coupled with staff testimonies, paints a picture that is as mesmerizing as it is troubling. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Have you ever wondered what happens when someone who appears calm and composed in public suddenly unleashes the storm behind closed doors? For Meghan Markle, staff say, these moments were not rare, they were routine. The polished duchess who smiles for cameras, attends galas, and carefully curates her public image transforms completely when the doors close. Staff describe scenes that are both terrifying and surreal, moments when even the most seasoned household employees were left speechless, unsure whether to intervene, hide, or simply survive. The first thing that becomes apparent from staff accounts is the unpredictability. No day was the same, no interaction predictable. A minor mistake could trigger an explosive reaction. A forgotten detail, a misinterpreted instruction, or a casual comment could escalate into a full-blown meltdown. And these weren't quiet sighs or subtle frustrations. They were emotional storms, full of yelling, doors slamming, and piercing glares that made staff question their own safety. One housekeeper recalled an incident that began with a misplaced set of documents. I put them exactly where I always do, they said, but Meghan couldn't find them immediately. Within minutes, she was pacing, raising her voice, and the tension just radiated. Harry tried to calm her, but even he seemed on edge. I'd never witnessed anything like it. Imagine walking into a room where two people you respect and admire suddenly become forces of raw, unpredictable energy. Staff admitted that these moments felt like being caught in the middle of a hurricane, with no clear way out. The recording captures some of these episodes. Meghan's voice, when it escalates, carries both anger and an almost strategic precision. Staff describe it as if she were aware of the impact of every word, using volume, timing, and tone to assert control over the room. And yet, there were also moments of vulnerability, fleeting glimpses of frustration spilling over into despair. It's a duality that confuses and captivates simultaneously. The public persona of grace and composure sharply contrasting with private eruptions of anger and control. Harry's role in these meltdowns is complex. Staff say he often tried to mediate, stepping in with calm reasoning, attempting to soothe the situation or redirect attention. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. And occasionally, according to the staff, his interventions seemed to escalate the tension, as though he were trying to balance diplomacy with loyalty and failing. The dynamic between the two becomes almost theatrical. The interplay of control, emotion, and response forming a cycle that staff found impossible to predict or manage. One particularly intense episode reportedly involved a household event that went wrong. Minor logistical errors that could happen in any large estate. Meghan's reaction, staff say, was immediate and overwhelming. Her voice carried through the corridors, doors slammed with force, and staff scurried to manage the fallout. Harry, according to the same staff members, initially attempted to calm her, but the frustration seemed to have a life of its own. By the end of the confrontation, employees described a palpable tension in the air, as if the walls themselves were vibrating with unresolved anger. These meltdowns were not isolated incidents. Staff described a pattern, an escalation that grew more intense over time. The smallest frustrations could trigger disproportionate reactions. And while some employees tried to maintain neutrality, observing quietly and avoiding direct involvement, others were forced into mediation roles, trying to anticipate emotional triggers and prevent damage. It was exhausting, one assistant admitted. You were always on edge, never sure what would set her off, never sure how Harry would respond. The household became a minefield. The emotional toll on staff cannot be overstated. Many described stress-induced insomnia, anxiety, and a constant sense of walking on eggshells. Even seasoned employees accustomed to high-pressure environments admitted that this was unlike anything they had encountered before. Yet, despite the fear and exhaustion, some staff admitted a morbid fascination with these meltdowns. It was terrifying, one said, but you couldn't look away. It was like watching a storm in slow motion, knowing you had to survive it. Contradictions abound. Meghan, for all her reported temper and volatility, also displayed moments of tenderness and vulnerability that caught staff off guard. Some recounted brief instances where she appeared regretful, almost apologetic after an outburst, only for the pattern to resume shortly thereafter. This duality, staff said, made it nearly impossible to predict behavior or develop strategies for coping. The environment was unstable, emotionally charged, and intensely demanding. And the public image of calm composure only amplified the disconnect. Social media, press appearances, and public engagements painted Meghan as poised, charming, and controlled. Staff emphasized that the difference between public persona and private behavior was stark. To the world, she was flawless. In the household, she was a force of nature, intense, sometimes merciless, and always unpredictable. It's a contradiction that staff said left them bewildered, questioning whether the two personas were even compatible within the same individual. Staff also reported that these meltdowns sometimes included what they described as manipulative tactics, raising voices strategically, issuing commands with subtle threats, or creating situations that placed employees in impossible positions. One assistant explained, it wasn't just about being angry. There was a method, a way to control everything and everyone around her. even if it meant pushing people to their limits. Harry, in these moments, reportedly tried to mitigate the damage, but staff suggest that the intensity of Meghan's emotions often overpowered his interventions. The recording reveals more than just volume and frustration. Listeners can detect tone shifts, subtle pauses, and changes in cadence that indicate emotional calculation. Staff members noted that these cues were almost like a language, signaling impending outbursts or indicating when an argument would escalate. For those living inside the household, interpreting these signals became a survival mechanism, a way to anticipate and react to an environment defined by volatility and power dynamics. Yet, there were moments when Meghan's anger intersected with genuine concern. Staff recalled incidents where her frustration stemmed from high expectations, a desire for perfection, or the stress of managing a public image that seemed constantly scrutinized. These emotional spikes, while often overwhelming, also hinted at the complexity of her character, a blend of ambition, vulnerability, and a relentless pursuit of control. Staff admitted it was difficult to separate personal grievance from the pressures of fame, which only intensified the impact of each meltdown. What's also remarkable is how Harry's behavior influenced these outbursts. Staff describe him as trying to balance loyalty, protection, and personal boundaries. Sometimes his calm voice helped de-escalate situations. Other times, his interventions inadvertently fueled frustration. The recording captures moments where he attempts reasoning, only to be met with renewed intensity. Staff say these interactions created a feedback loop. Meltdowns escalated, mediation failed, and tension grew until a new cycle of confrontation began. And the consequences for staff were tangible. One assistant recounted feeling physically ill after witnessing repeated meltdowns. Another described anxiety so severe that they questioned whether they could continue working in the household. Yet, despite the fear and exhaustion, employees remained loyal, often stepping in to smooth over conflicts, manage logistics, and prevent situations from spiraling further. You had to be part of the drama to survive it, one staff member admitted. There was no choice. The recording also exposes moments where Meghan's anger was not directed at mistakes or oversights, but at perceived challenges to control or authority. Staff described situations where minor disagreements triggered disproportionate reactions, suggesting that some outbursts were strategic rather than purely emotional. Harry's attempts to mediate sometimes succeeded, but often he was caught in the delicate balance between calming the storm and maintaining the household's functioning. And yet, for all the chaos, there were glimmers of normalcy. Staff noted brief interludes of calm, moments when Meghan and Harry seemed to reconnect, laugh, or plan for the day ahead. These moments were fleeting, but they offered perspective on the duality of the household, intense volatility juxtaposed with rare harmony. The oscillation between these extremes created a sense of unpredictability, a tension that staff had to navigate daily. So what does all of this mean for those who observe from the outside? It suggests that the public image, carefully curated and polished, masks a reality defined by emotion, tension, and complex dynamics. The recording and the staff accounts surrounding it provide an unfiltered glimpse into a world few are permitted to witness, a world where fame, power, and personal expectation collide in explosive ways. But just as we start to process these private meltdowns, something even more shocking emerges from the recording. A moment that defies explanation, a confrontation that escalates beyond anything staff had seen before, and one that would leave everyone questioning what they thought they knew about Meghan, Harry, and the household itself. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Who really holds the power in a household where emotions run as high as the stakes? In the Sussex residence, staff describe a dynamic that is as complicated as it is explosive. Meghan's intensity is well documented in the leaked recordings and staff accounts, but Harry's role is far more nuanced than most outsiders realize. Is he the calm mediator, the enabler, or something in between? And how does his presence, or absence, affect the tension that pervades the house? Staff repeatedly stress that Harry is neither passive nor absent, but his attempts to navigate the chaos often produce unpredictable results. There are moments where his calm voice and diplomatic approach diffuse a situation, softening Meghan's anger and giving employees a brief reprieve. But then there are times when his words, tone, or gestures inadvertently escalate the tension. It's almost as if he is constantly walking a tightrope, balancing loyalty, diplomacy, and survival within a household that feels perpetually on edge. One staff member described an incident that illustrates this perfectly. Meghan had become frustrated over a minor scheduling conflict, raising her voice and slamming doors in quick succession. Harry stepped in, his voice measured, trying to redirect the conversation toward a solution. But rather than calming the storm, Meghan's frustration shifted, targeting him instead. According to staff, Harry appeared flustered, torn between diffusing the tension and defending himself. The result was a back and forth that left the entire household frozen in uncertainty, unsure whether to intervene or simply wait it out. The recordings give further insight into Harry's role. At times, he is the voice of reason, attempting to mediate disagreements between Meghan and staff, or between Meghan and himself. Staff describe his interventions as gentle, reasoned, and patient, yet there is also an unmistakable undertone of fatigue. They say he occasionally sighs, his voice betraying the pressure of trying to maintain peace in a household where the emotional atmosphere is almost tangible. In private moments captured on audio, you can hear his attempts to explain, justify, or calm, but they are not always received as intended. What complicates Harry's position is the duality of support and restraint. Staff report that he often tries to protect Meghan, shielding her from criticism, smoothing over errors, and absorbing some of the frustration directed at her. At the same time, he seems aware of the intensity and volatility of her reactions, attempting to guide her in private moments while also maintaining a careful balance that keeps the household functional. It's a delicate dance, one that staff suggest is exhausting and sometimes ineffective. In one particularly revealing instance, staff described a minor dispute that escalated to a dramatic confrontation. Meghan had criticized a staff member for what she perceived as incompetence, and Harry stepped in to mediate. Rather than de-escalating the situation, his intervention seemed to trigger a new wave of anger. Staff observed Meghan's frustration shift toward him, her words laced with both resentment and sharp criticism. It was like watching two hurricanes collide, one assistant recalled. We didn't know where to stand or what would happen next. Harry's responses, however, are not solely reactive. Staff note that he often tries to anticipate triggers, proactively attempting to prevent confrontations from escalating. This involves subtle interventions, changes in tone, or even redirecting discussions entirely. But in a household where tensions run so high, even the best intentions can backfire. Staff describe moments where his presence, while well-meaning, unintentionally intensified the volatility, creating feedback loops of stress and confrontation. The complexity of Harry's role is further complicated by his own frustrations and pressures. Staff report that he is keenly aware of the public eye, of media scrutiny, and of the narratives surrounding him and Meghan. This awareness appears to inform his private behavior, adding layers of calculation to his attempts at mediation. Some staff suggest that he is trying to balance the personal dynamics of his marriage with the external pressures of fame, wealth, and public expectation, a nearly impossible task that inevitably contributes to the household tension. There are also moments captured in the recordings where Harry's attempts at humor or levity are used to defuse stress. A quip here, a light comment there, but the effect is unpredictable. Sometimes Meghan responds with a fleeting smile or laugh. Other times, the comment triggers a new round of frustration. Staff describe these interactions as high-stakes improvisation, where the slightest misstep could provoke a reaction that reverberates through the household. The recordings reveal moments of tenderness, too. Despite the volatility, Harry occasionally shows empathy and patience, addressing Meghan's concerns with a measured voice, attempting to validate her feelings while simultaneously encouraging calm. Staff describe these moments as brief, yet significant. They provide a glimpse into the emotional complexity of the relationship and the pressure Harry faces as both a mediator and a partner. Yet, the contradictions are striking. On one hand, Harry is compassionate, patient, and protective. On the other, staff describe moments where he seems to defer too much, avoid confrontation, or fail to assert boundaries. This duality, they say, adds to the unpredictability of Meghan's reactions and contributes to a household environment that is tense, fragile, and difficult to navigate. Staff also note that Harry's approach is influenced by external pressures. He is conscious of public perception, aware of media narratives, and reportedly cautious about how any incident might be interpreted outside the household. This awareness, while understandable, sometimes hampers his ability to act decisively, creating situations where frustration continues unchecked and staff are left in the crossfire. One assistant described an instance where a miscommunication between Meghan and Harry escalated dramatically. Meghan had expected a specific action from Harry, which did not occur. The resulting tension, amplified by previous stressors, led to an argument in which Harry's attempts at reasoning failed. Staff described the scene as a combination of frustration, fatigue, and emotional intensity, leaving them scrambling to mitigate fallout and maintain a sense of order. The recordings themselves also hint at moments where Harry's patience is tested to its limits. Staff describe him using measured tones, carefully choosing words, and sometimes pausing to assess reactions. It's clear from these moments that he is trying to navigate a volatile environment, protect the household, and maintain his own composure, all while under extraordinary emotional and public pressures. What emerges from these accounts is a portrait of a partner who is both human and complex. Harry is not a passive bystander, nor is he a flawless mediator. He is a man attempting to balance loyalty, love, and duty in an environment fraught with tension, unpredictability, and high stakes. Staff note that his presence can either calm a situation or, unintentionally, exacerbate it, creating a household dynamic that is perpetually on edge. And then there are the moments when Harry's interventions reveal deeper conflicts between the couple. Staff report private conversations in which Harry tries to reason with Meghan about public perception, financial decisions, or interpersonal disagreements. In these recordings, the tone shifts from measured calm to exasperation, reflecting the cumulative effect of daily stress and high-pressure expectations. The oscillation between mediation and tension underscores the challenge of navigating a household defined by volatility, fame, and intense scrutiny. So, when you listen to the leaked recording, it becomes clear that Harry's role is pivotal, but complicated. He is neither the villain nor the savior. He is the human element in a household consumed by emotional intensity and high stakes. Staff accounts corroborate this, emphasizing the delicate balance he attempts to maintain, the unpredictability of Meghan's reactions, and the stress of mediating in a storm of ego, ambition, and public expectation. Yet, despite his efforts, one incident stands out, a confrontation so intense, so unexpected, that even Harry seemed unprepared for its consequences. Staff say that what happened next changed the dynamic of the household in a way that had ripple effects for weeks, if not months, afterward. It's an episode that challenges everything we thought we knew about Harry's role, his temper, and his ability to manage a household under extreme pressure. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What drives a couple to step away from centuries of tradition, royal duty, and public expectation, only to find themselves ensnared in conflicts that no one outside their inner circle could anticipate? Staff accounts and leaked recordings suggest that for Meghan Markle and Prince Harry, the struggle isn't just about marriage or even household tension. It's about the collision between fame, image, and the family they both want to protect and control. From the moment staff stepped inside the Sussex household, it was clear that appearances mattered. Every detail, how the house looked, how meals were presented, how events were planned, carried a weight far beyond domestic routine. Staff reported that even minor mishaps were magnified under the scrutiny of public expectation. Meghan, in particular, was described as obsessively attentive to optics, often prioritizing perception over process. And Harry, while trying to balance his personal loyalty and royal upbringing, often found himself caught between reality and performance. Staff described countless examples of this dynamic. A simple dinner arrangement could spark frustration if it didn't meet expectations or align with Meghan's vision of presentation. A staff member recalled, "It was like everything we did had to be perfect, not just for the family, but for what the world might think." These expectations extended to personal interactions as well. Meghan's attention to image and influence sometimes led to private confrontations that seemed disproportionate to the initial issue. Staff, already under pressure to maintain calm, had to navigate the intersection of domestic duty and high-profile optics. And it wasn't just about perfection, it was about control. Staff repeatedly emphasized that many of Meghan's private outbursts stemmed from an insistence on managing both the household and the narrative surrounding it. Every action, every comment, every arrangement was a reflection of her influence. Harry's involvement complicated this further. While often supportive, staff say he sometimes deferred to her authority, either to avoid confrontation or to maintain the household's fragile equilibrium. This created a dynamic where Meghan's need for control intersected with Harry's attempts at mediation, resulting in a tense and emotionally charged environment. Money, fame, and social status were never far from the conversation. Staff recount moments where disagreements weren't about personal grievances, but about public perception, branding, and opportunities for influence. Whether it was choosing events to attend, controlling messaging in the media, or navigating philanthropic visibility, the household operated as a microcosm of high-stakes performance. Every decision carried weight beyond personal consequence. Staff noted that arguments over minor domestic matters often escalated because they became proxies for larger concerns, public image, media coverage, or perceived loyalty. One incident, recalled vividly by a long-term housekeeper, highlights the fusion of domestic tension and public performance. A simple scheduling oversight, a delayed delivery, a misaligned calendar entry, led to a confrontation that escalated beyond the household walls. Meghan reportedly criticized not only the logistical failure, but the impact it could have on public perception. Harry, attempting to mediate, tried to redirect the focus toward practical resolution, but the conversation spiraled. Staff described the scene as both intense and surreal, a collision of personal frustration and external pressure, with the employees caught in the crossfire. Fame, staff say, also amplified the stakes of every interaction. The household is constantly aware of the media's gaze, real or imagined. Staff recounted moments when Meghan would stress over social media narratives, anticipating criticism or praise for even minor actions. Harry, similarly cognizant of public perception, sometimes tried to temper these concerns, attempting to focus on practical solutions while managing emotional responses. The recordings capture this tension, a constant interplay between private emotion and public scrutiny. The impact on staff cannot be understated. Employees describe a pervasive sense of walking on eggshells, never knowing when an issue might escalate into a confrontation fueled not by domestic routine, but by concerns over image and reputation. It was like living in two worlds at once, one assistant explained. The household was our reality, but the media, the public, the narrative, it was always there, hovering, influencing every word, every action. Yet, amid this chaos, there were contradictions. Meghan's drive for public approval coexisted with moments of genuine care and empathy for the household staff. She would occasionally express appreciation, reward loyalty, or personally intervene to resolve an issue. Harry's attempts to mediate often reflected a similar complexity, a desire to protect, to support, and to maintain household harmony. But the pressures of fame, ambition, and expectation frequently undermined these intentions, creating a cycle where emotional outbursts, mediation attempts, and public scrutiny became intertwined. Staff also noted that these pressures sometimes led to conflicts between the couple themselves. Arguments were not always about household matters, but about differing priorities regarding fame, media strategy, and social influence. Meghan, according to insiders, often prioritized image and perception, while Harry attempted to balance these concerns with personal and familial obligations. The resulting tension could be intense, emotionally charged, and unpredictable, leaving staff struggling to manage the fallout. Financial considerations, too, played a role. Staff recounted disputes where spending decisions, charitable donations, or business ventures became sources of tension. These were rarely about money alone. They were symbolic of autonomy, control, and influence. Staff observed that debates about finances often intersected with arguments about public image, media attention, and personal authority, creating a volatile mix that could explode over seemingly trivial matters. The recordings capture the interplay between personal emotion and external expectation vividly. Meghan's frustrations often emerge as a combination of private grievances and broader concerns about reputation and influence. Harry's responses, while generally calm, sometimes carry subtle signs of exasperation, fatigue, or frustration with the relentless pressure. Staff described these exchanges as high-stakes negotiations, where emotional intensity, strategic communication, and the constant awareness of an audience collide. This tension extends beyond the immediate household. Staff note that the couple's decisions, behaviors, and interactions have ripple effects on extended family, advisors, and the public. Every private disagreement carries the potential to influence public perception, media coverage, and internal family dynamics. The recording, staff say, provides a rare glimpse into how these pressures manifest in real time, revealing the human cost of living under constant scrutiny and expectation. And yet, amid the turmoil, there are fleeting moments of humor, camaraderie, and connection. Staff describe situations where the couple would laugh together, resolve minor disagreements, or share quiet moments away from the glare of cameras. These interludes, while rare, highlight the complexity of their relationship, a mix of ambition, love, frustration, and the relentless influence of fame. The juxtaposition of these private meltdowns against the couple's public image is stark. Social media, interviews, and appearances suggest a polished, composed pair, united and supportive. Staff accounts and the recordings, however, reveal a more volatile reality, a household governed by emotion, perception, and the intricate dance between personal desires and public expectations. Every argument, every intervention, every outburst is colored by the awareness of external scrutiny, adding layers of tension that employees must navigate constantly. So what does this tell us about the hidden motives driving the Sussexes? Staff suggests that much of the tension is fueled not by love alone, but by the interplay of fame, ambition, and the desire for control. Arguments over small matters often reflect larger concerns: how the couple is perceived by the public, how they manage their household, and how they assert authority within the family and broader social circles. Fame becomes both a lens and a magnifier, turning minor disputes into high-stakes conflicts that ripple throughout the household and beyond. And then there is the culmination of these pressures, a confrontation captured in the recordings that surpasses any previous argument. Staff describe an escalation so intense that it forced both Meghan and Harry to confront the consequences of their ambitions, emotional intensity, and the impact of fame on their relationship. It is a moment that leaves staff shocked, unsettled, and uncertain about the future of the household. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What happens when people who have been silent for years finally decide to tell the truth? For the Sussex household staff, speaking out wasn't just a decision. It was a risk, a moral dilemma, and a necessity. After years of witnessing what they describe as a toxic, high-pressure environment, they reached a breaking point. And what they revealed paints a picture that no headline, interview, or Instagram post could ever capture. The first thing to understand is the emotional toll of working in this household. Staff repeatedly describe constant tension, unpredictability, and the pressure of walking on eggshells every single day. One long-term employee said, "You didn't know if you were coming to work to manage a home or to survive an emotional battlefield." They spoke of moments where Meghan's frustration and anger were immediate and intense, often triggered by small mistakes, miscommunications, or perceived slights. Every action was scrutinized, every decision magnified, and every staff member had to navigate not only the household dynamics, but also the public narrative surrounding the couple. Many staff revealed that the leaked recording, which exposed private arguments between Meghan and Harry, only confirmed what they had lived through daily. They described Meghan as unpredictable, commanding, and at times merciless in her reactions, while Harry's attempts at mediation, though often genuine, were inconsistent. Some staff members explained that the couple's fame intensified these dynamics, turning ordinary domestic stress into a complex dance of emotion, ego, and public perception. One assistant recounted a particularly striking example: A routine household error, a missing delivery, triggered an immediate explosion from Meghan. Doors slammed, voices rose, and staff were left scrambling to mitigate the fallout. Harry's attempt to intervene, staff said, backfired. Meghan's frustration shifted, partially directed at him, creating a scenario where the emotional storm intensified rather than dissipated. Staff described feeling trapped in a maelstrom where no one, not even the couple, could fully control the outcome. What makes these accounts especially compelling is the consistency among staff. Multiple employees corroborated incidents described in the recording, painting a picture of an environment that was chaotic, tense, and at times emotionally exhausting. While the public sees carefully curated appearances and polished statements, staff emphasized that behind closed doors, the household operated under very different rules. Minor errors became crises, small disagreements escalated rapidly, and everyone had to constantly anticipate reactions. Some staff spoke of the strategies they developed to survive. Anticipating triggers, managing emotional fallout, and navigating the delicate balance of loyalty and self-preservation became part of the daily routine. One long-serving housekeeper explained, "We learned to read the room, to anticipate moods, and to move carefully, almost invisibly. It wasn't just about doing our jobs, it was about keeping the peace and avoiding becoming a target." The emotional labor involved was immense, often leaving staff exhausted, anxious, and emotionally drained. And yet, despite the challenges, there were moments of profound insight. Staff noticed patterns in Meghan's behavior, ways in which fame and perception influenced her reactions, and the subtle power dynamics that shaped interactions with Harry. Some described observing the Duchess expressing vulnerability in private moments, revealing that beneath the intensity and volatility was a complex, multifaceted personality grappling with the pressures of public scrutiny and personal ambition. Harry, staff say, occupies a similarly complicated space. His attempts at mediation, while often sincere, were not always effective. Some staff noted that his presence could either calm a situation or inadvertently escalate it, depending on the circumstances. The recordings reveal his careful choice of words, measured tones, and attempts to validate concerns while maintaining control. Yet even his interventions were subject to the unpredictability of the emotional environment. Financial and fame-related tensions also play a role in these untold stories. Staff recounted moments where disagreements revolved not merely around domestic duties, but also around image management, media strategy, and financial decisions. One assistant described an instance where a seemingly minor scheduling issue escalated into a dispute about how the couple would be portrayed publicly. Staff emphasized that these conflicts were not just about daily tasks. They were about control, perception, and influence. The emotional impact on staff cannot be overstated. Many reported stress-induced health problems, anxiety, and a constant sense of alertness. They spoke of feeling trapped between loyalty to the family and the need to protect their own well-being. Yet, despite these pressures, the decision to speak out was not easy. Fear of retaliation, public scrutiny, and professional consequences weighed heavily. When they finally chose to share their experiences, it was with the intent to provide context, to reveal the realities behind the polished facade, and to offer a glimpse into the high-pressure world of the Sussex household. One of the most revealing aspects of staff testimony is the consistency in describing Meghan's temperament. Staff depict a woman whose intensity and drive are inseparable from her expectations of herself and those around her. They recount moments of explosive anger, meticulous attention to detail, and strategic control, alongside fleeting glimpses of empathy and vulnerability. This duality, staff say, made it both challenging and compelling to work within the household. Every day was a balancing act between managing expectations and navigating emotional volatility. Harry's role, according to staff, is similarly layered. He is seen as compassionate and protective, but also human and fallible. His interventions sometimes prevented conflict, but at other times, they unintentionally exacerbated it. Staff described scenarios in which his efforts to mediate backfired, leaving both him and Meghan frustrated and the household atmosphere tense. The recordings highlight these moments, offering a rare glimpse into the pressures he faces and the limitations of his influence within the family dynamic. Staff also emphasized the interplay between public and private personas. Meghan's carefully curated image contrasted sharply with the intense private behavior captured in recordings. Staff noted that she often seemed acutely aware of how any misstep could be perceived publicly, which added another layer of pressure to the household. Harry, too, navigated this duality, balancing the need to support his wife, maintain his own composure, and respond to internal conflicts, all under the scrutiny of a public that expects perfection. And then there is the human cost. Staff describe emotional exhaustion, stress, and anxiety as constant companions. The need to anticipate moods, manage conflicts, and maintain the household amid emotional volatility created a level of pressure few could endure indefinitely. Yet, even in the most stressful moments, staff often found themselves drawn to the intensity of the environment, a combination of fear, fascination, and loyalty that made leaving impossible for many. As these untold stories emerge, they offer more than just scandal. They provide insight into the complexity of human behavior under extraordinary circumstances. Staff accounts, combined with recordings, reveal how fame, ambition, and personal dynamics intertwine to create an environment where every action is scrutinized, every reaction amplified, and every day a high-stakes performance. The intensity of these experiences, staff say, is difficult to convey to anyone outside the household. But the most shocking revelations were yet to come. Staff reported incidents that went beyond meltdowns and minor confrontations, episodes that exposed deep cracks in trust, loyalty, and control. These moments, captured partially in the recordings, demonstrate the extent to which emotional volatility, fame, and the pressures of public life can collide to create scenes that are both dramatic and unsettling. And in the midst of all this, one employee revealed a confrontation so intense, so unprecedented, that it would change the dynamics of the household forever. A dispute that escalated beyond anything staff had witnessed previously, challenging assumptions, exposing vulnerabilities, and forcing both Meghan and Harry to confront the consequences of their private conflicts. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What role does money play in a household already teetering on the edge of emotional chaos? According to staff, financial tensions in the Sussex household were never far from the surface. The recordings, combined with insider accounts, suggest that disputes over money were intertwined with arguments about power, control, and public perception. In a home where emotions already ran high, money became both a symbol and a catalyst for conflict. Staff report that Meghan's focus on financial matters went beyond ordinary household budgeting. She was described as strategic, meticulous, and sometimes uncompromising when it came to expenditures, donations, and personal spending. A minor discrepancy or oversight could ignite heated arguments, often magnified by the stress of maintaining a public image. Employees felt that every financial decision was a reflection of authority and influence, making small errors feel monumental. Harry's involvement added another layer of complexity. Staff noted that he often tried to mediate or rationalize spending decisions, but the emotional context sometimes rendered reason ineffective. The recordings reveal moments in which discussions about money, while seemingly mundane, escalated into full-blown confrontations. Staff recall the tension in the room, the careful measurement of words, and the subtle shifts in tone that signaled imminent outbursts. One employee described a dispute over household renovations, which escalated unexpectedly. Meghan was displeased with the timing and presentation, while Harry attempted to negotiate adjustments. What started as a logistical discussion transformed into a tense exchange about authority, responsibility, and perception. Staff described the room as charged, with every participant acutely aware of the stakes, not only in terms of cost, but in terms of control, respect, and public image. Money wasn't just about spending, it was about perception and influence. Staff reported that Meghan was deeply concerned with appearances, ensuring that purchases, donations, and lifestyle choices reflected both personal standards and public scrutiny. Harry, similarly aware of public perception, sometimes sought compromise, attempting to balance financial responsibility with the demands of image and influence. These competing priorities often led to friction, both private and recorded. The recordings themselves provide chilling insight. At times, Meghan's tone is sharp, almost surgical, targeting perceived missteps or inefficiencies. Harry's responses, calm and measured, attempt to temper the situation, but the intensity of her focus on both financial detail and public consequence can overwhelm even the most diplomatic interventions. Staff described feeling like spectators in a psychological chess game, where each move carried consequences far beyond what was immediately visible. Some staff suggested that financial arguments were also linked to deeper issues of control. For Meghan, money was a tool to assert authority, to direct attention, and to shape outcomes. For Harry, money was often a negotiation between support, loyalty, and maintaining household stability. These differing approaches, while not inherently incompatible, created situations where conflict was almost inevitable. Employees described walking a tightrope, managing both the couple's emotional reactions and the practical demands of the household. Beyond daily finances, staff reported that charitable contributions, public engagements, and social commitments often became flashpoints. Meghan, they said, was particularly attentive to the optics of generosity, ensuring that donations, public appearances, and philanthropic actions aligned with broader narratives of influence and responsibility. Harry's responses, while generally supportive, sometimes clashed with her priorities, generating arguments that were intense, private, and emotionally charged. The emotional impact of these financial disputes on staff was significant. Employees described tension, anxiety, and even fear during moments when disagreements escalated. Small errors could be magnified.